Her name echoes through history, Joan of Arc. A simple peasant girl who, against all odds, led armies, crowned a king, and turned the tide of a devastating war. But her story holds a deeper, more complex layer, one that challenges conventional notions of gender and power in the medieval world. She didn't just command men, she became a man in the eyes of many, adopting male attire, hairstyle, and a persona that transcended the strict gender boundaries of her time. This is the secret history of Joan of Arc, the woman who ruled an empire, not literally as a king, but as a military and spiritual force, embodying a masculine ideal in a period of desperate need, and ultimately paying the ultimate price for it. The year is 1429. France is bleeding. The 100 Years' War against England has raged for decades, devastating the country. The English and their Burgundian allies control vast swaths of French territory, including Paris, and the rightful French Dauphin Charles is uncrowned and weak, a king in name only, holed up in Chillon. Despair hangs heavy over the land. Into this chaos steps Joan, a 17-year-old illiterate peasant girl from Domremy. Her story, as she told it, began with divine visions. The voices of Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret commanded her to save France, to lift the siege of Orléans, and to lead the Dauphin to Reims for his coronation. What followed was a journey that defied every societal expectation for a woman of her era. Joan's first audacious move was to adopt male attire. This wasn't a fashion statement. It was a profound transformation. She cut her hair short, donned doublet, hose, and a soldier's tunic. When she eventually wore armor, it was male armor, customized for her. In a world where dress codes were strictly enforced and gender roles rigidly defined, this was a radical act. For a woman to wear men's clothes was considered an abomination under biblical law, often associated with witchcraft or moral transgression. Yet Joan insisted it was by divine command, essential for her mission and for her safety among soldiers. This male guise was crucial. It allowed her to navigate a male-dominated world of war and politics, providing her with both practical protection from sexual assault and symbolic authority. It blurred the lines, allowing men to accept commands from a divinely appointed figure who transcended typical feminine constraints. Her arrival at Chinon to meet the Dauphin Charles was nothing short of miraculous. A peasant girl, barely out of childhood, managed to gain an audience with the besieged and skeptical future king. Accounts describe her immediately recognizing Charles despite him being disguised, a detail that quickly fueled belief in her divine connection. Charles, desperate for a miracle, eventually granted her a small retinue and permission to go to Orléans. What Joan brought to the French war effort was not just military strategy, though she proved to have a surprisingly shrewd grasp of tactics, but something far more potent: morale. The French soldiers, demoralized and defeated, found in Joan a living embodiment of divine favor. She carried a banner depicting Christ in majesty, not a sword, emphasizing her spiritual mission. Her presence alone, the belief that God was on their side through this young woman, ignited a fervent fighting spirit. The siege of Orléans had lasted for months, seemingly unbreakable. Joan arrived, rallied the troops, and in a series of audacious, almost reckless assaults, turned the tide. Within days, the English defenses crumbled, and the siege was lifted. This victory was a colossal turning point in the 100 Years' War, proving Joan's divine mandate to all who witnessed it. After Orléans, Joan pressed Charles to march to Reims, deep in enemy territory, for his coronation. Despite military objections and the immense risk, Joan insisted. The march itself was a psychological victory, as towns along the way surrendered to the French, their citizens witnessing the Maid of Orléans leading their rightful king. On July 17, 1429, Charles VII was crowned King of France in Reims Cathedral, with Joan standing by his side in full armor. This act solidified his legitimacy and provided France with a true rallying point. For a brief, dazzling period, Joan was at the pinnacle of her influence. She was hailed as a savior, a prophet, an unyielding force against the English. Yet, her meteoric rise was soon met with equally rapid decline. Her push for a direct assault on Paris, advocating for aggressive tactics, clashed with the more cautious approach of the newly crowned King Charles and his advisors. They, perhaps uncomfortable with her independent power and popular appeal, began to sideline her. Then, during a skirmish at Compiègne in May 1430, Joan was captured by Burgundian forces, allies of the English. It was a pivotal moment, not just for Joan, but for the entire course of the war. Charles VII, the king she had crowned, made no serious effort to ransom her, abandoning her to her fate. The English, eager to discredit her divine claims and undermine French morale, bought Joan from the Burgundians and put her on trial for heresy, led by pro-English French clergymen. This was not a trial for military defeat, but for spiritual crimes. The charges against her were numerous, but one stood out as particularly damning: her cross-dressing. Throughout weeks of interrogation, Joan steadfastly defended her male attire as a divine command, necessary for her mission and her safety. She refused to renounce it, even under threat of torture. Her refusal to conform to gender norms, particularly her insistence on wearing male clothing, became a key weapon in the prosecution's arsenal. It was portrayed as an act of defiance against God and the Church, a sign of her alleged witchcraft and heresy. They also accused her of lying about her visions and refusing to submit to the authority of the Church. On May 30th, 1431, after a highly politicized and deeply unfair trial, Joan was found guilty. She was taken to the marketplace in Rouen and burned at the stake. She was just 19 years old. As the flames consumed her, one English soldier reportedly cried out, "We are lost. We have burned a saint." Joan of Arc's story is a profound exploration of gender, power, and belief. She was a woman who, driven by an unshakable conviction, stepped into a role traditionally reserved for men, that of a military leader and a national savior. Her adoption of male identity was not merely a disguise, it was integral to her effectiveness, a visual and symbolic assertion of authority in a patriarchal world. While she didn't rule an empire in a conventional sense, her actions, guided by her unique gender-bending persona, profoundly shaped the destiny of France. 25 years after her death, a posthumous retrial, initiated by Charles VII, who needed to clear his name and validate his own coronation, overturned her conviction, declaring her innocent and a martyr. Centuries later, she was canonized as a saint by the very church that condemned her. Joan of Arc remains an enduring symbol of courage, of faith, of defying expectations, and of the extraordinary power of an individual who dared to challenge the established order, even if it meant paying the ultimate price. Her legacy reminds us that history is often made by those who step outside the lines, regardless of the consequences.